The world has changed. Weather is getting more extreme.
Something's changing Earth's climate. Temperatures are rising. Ice sheets are melting. Weather patterns are changing. Sea level is rising. What's causing these and other changes? Time to round up the usual suspects. In ages past, big changes have been caused by volcanic eruptions, ocean currents, changes in the sun and Earth's orientation to it. And there's been that occasional giant asteroid. But none of these natural causes can explain what's happened to our planet in just the last 150 years. So what's the difference between today and a century and a half ago? It's how we live and work. Our industrial societies have changed more than the landscape. We've been burning fossil fuels. And that's added lots of greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, which traps the sun's heat. That's why the Earth is warming, more and more as each year passes. So what's causing this climate change? All the evidence points to us. That's the bad news. The good news? It's a lot easier to change our behavior than any of the usual suspects.
Welcome back, global citizens. I am the scribe with my co-host, the Pharaoh, and this is our podcast, Stay Woke.
Stay woke. Stay woke. Stay woke.
Stay woke. Segment. We just started with addressing our political questions, and so we as the Millennials are going to start off the second half of our segment where we're going to be talking about climate change / climate control. And I'm gonna just go ahead and pose our questions, a question rather, to our Xers. So brothers, the question we had is, since climate change affects everyone, do you think climate change should be a top priority, and why has the older generation failed to act with urgency? I will say it again. Since climate change affects everyone, do you think climate change should be a top priority, and why has the older generation failed to act with urgency?
Shots fired. First of all, elders. Put the respect on your elders, right? But you call it older generation. Get them, T.
I think the reason that it isn't a top priority is because we're about to die pretty soon. You know, so this is your problem. You know what I mean? We're about to leave you a mess, a hot mess. So, no, I mean, it should. And there's something called, what is it called? Generational, fratricide or patricide or something like that. But it's basically we create nuclear missiles, thousands of them, in this detente between us and China or whoever. And you guys got to deal with the breakdown of the uranium over these thousands and thousands of years, right? And that was done to us before.
Bro, not helping. Helping.
I'm just telling you, hey, to understand a problem first, to solve it, you got to understand it, right? But so I'll tell you some of the things that we can do. I mean, there's too many damn cars on the street. So you have millennials. Well, I don't know if Elon Musk is a millennial, is he? But you've got people. Okay, so you got people in our generation, or maybe in the middle generation. Maybe it's a Gen Y or something like that, or whatever gen it is. Who's creating solutions to try to take down the carbon load that we have. Plastics is a big problem. So, you can go with your fork and spoon into your work, and you're using, recycling and things like that. And you're actually recycling. Growing a garden, planting trees, different things that you can do that don't seem to do a lot. Plus also, my man James brought up about, Big Mama and not having to drive far. There were plans that never got instituted to have gardens in the middle of Compton or in the middle of South Central or whatever, where people didn't have to travel very far. They can get their exercise, they can get their vegetables, and they don't have to put miles in the car. Because we know, most of everybody in there is from California, the Western, the Best Coast, you got to drive everywhere. You can't walk to most places. You know, New York is different. Chicago, you could take the L. You've got mass transit. There is no mass transit that I know of. There's the RTD, and nobody uses that shit. You know, out in LA. You drive your own car. And how many people do you see in the HOV lane? So I try to use less plastics, try not to, use so many things that are, big diesel, driven cars and things like that. Try not to waste water.
I hear all of that, but is that something that you're consciously aware of? And is this something that you implement in your environment? Do you teach people in your generation about all these things?
Yes, it's what I do. It's a way of life. So just like anything, a habit, you keep on doing it and doing it and doing it. So like I said, I bring my lunch into work or so. I don't use a plastic fork and plastic knife that I see there. I got my own, Tupperware. It's a bamboo Tupperware. You can heat it up and it's got a fork and a spoon in there. But just not have, if you ever got anything from Amazon, which that's some millennial shit, you opening up boxes all over the place, dude. You got a box for the box for the box. You know what I mean? And I understand it's convenience and stuff like that for right now, but that's your issue. This is I buy a lot of shit too.
He said that's some millennial shit.
Hey, can I jump in there just for a second?
Can I interject?
Keep going.
No, y'all asked us this question though. Go ahead. Let's finish though. Go ahead, James.
I attended like a workshop with young people, and this was some of the topics. And I'm gonna just share what they shared because I don't want you to think I'm not that ingenious thinking.
No, James, it's about us. He asked us, what did we do, bro? You can't go to there. You got to
Okay, well, let me just tell you what I've done, what I've implemented. One of the things I've done is that when I brush my teeth, I don't let the water just run. So I don't let the water just run when I brush my teeth. When I shower, I try to get the room temperature nice because most of the times when I lather up, I'll cut the water off. Because you're talking, when you lather, that's like 3 to 4 or 5 minutes of just water running. And then, so what I do is I'll cut it off. And so those are just two of the things that I implemented to just to conserve water.
All right, brother, get to those plastics though, those aluminum cans though, because that's just water though.
Well,
don't fuck around with it, bro. The plastic, bro. Come on.
Having a water bottle that you fill up, and you don't have to,
man.
Yeah, all of that stuff. They found like plastics in the Marianas Trench, which is like the deepest point, and they're finding it's like nano bits. So it's
microplastics.
Yeah, microplastics, right?
Are fucking this shit up.
It in. So you really need to do something like that. Even maybe decreasing your meat consumption. I see my brother Tyrell eat the kale salad.
That's the point that I was trying to make.
All right, bro. So listen, I'm out. So let me just, I'm out. Listen, okay.
Hold on. We can't.
This is what I want to hear.
Listen, all right. Listen, we're over.
And that's difficult because, there's people that are like, yo, I'm going to eat meat and, whatever. But it's the way that it's produced on such a mass scale. When we was coming up and you had steak, that meant something. Now they got McRibs, steak sandwiches, $2, and you're like, how do you produce meat on such a large scale? But it's harming the community. So farm to table and patronizing those companies or those restaurants or those purveyors that are decreasing the travel of goods, from California's got tons of fruit, tons of ranches, all types of stuff. So you guys got it. Atlanta's the same way. We got a lot of farmers. Georgia's a big agricultural state. So things like that can decrease, hopefully, the carbon output. But, maybe driving, carpooling, when we're talking about Big Mama needing a ride to something.
Yeah, come on, James. You got to clean it up, bro. Listen, we know you do good with the water, bro, but come on, man.
No, but really, like, I do recycle. Here in Las Vegas, we have to have 2 waste baskets.
Okay.
We have one waste basket that's designated for recycling, and then we have the other one just regular rubbish.
Okay.
But I'm big on recycling. I recycle around my job. We have a program. We don't use straws. Interesting enough, that brought a whole different drama to the table. I didn't know straws was that important to some people, but I don't use straws. I do limit plastic. I prefer to do more like a paper cup or something like that versus a plastic. Now, if I'm out, I got to get the Soleil sippy cup. I meant the Soleil red cup going. So you got to excuse that one.
let me say something, right?
Go ahead, brother.
I agree, like, on all the points that that you guys have raised, right? Like, and I want to salute you, Tayari. Like, that's a great point that you made. Like, I feel like we need to empower ourselves in terms of just where we get our food. This is our generation. I feel like has a huge responsibility about learning gardening and growing food and understanding the mechanics of all of that, right? And all the stuff that you guys have kind of mentioned makes a difference, right? Like recycling, doing the best that you can with the straws, with the plastics, all that stuff. All that makes a difference. But literally the meat consumption, right? And I'm looking at Pharaoh when I say this. Meat consumption, right? the meat and dairy industry, right? It's the second leading cause of greenhouse gas effects. And I think
if an impala, if a deer run around there, I'm gonna slam my head into a zebra.
You gotta hear this out. You gotta hear this out. Just because you don't like it, you have to give this a chance, all right? So, it is literally number 2 in terms of an industry that wastes so much unneeded water, right? That can be used in so many other ways, and also produces just a lot of greenhouse gas effects, carbon, right? So in terms of looking at your personal sort of contribution and output in how you conduct your life, that's literally the best way to actually battle this climate change that we're going through, right? So I just want to bring that up. But
okay,
what I also want to say in terms of let me
answer the question. I didn't get a chance yet, right? Let me get a chance. I didn't get a chance to answer the question.
Let me say this and then you ask. Let me say this and then you ask.
Go ahead.
Right?
Go ahead.
So I feel like the question is asking, of course, about you personally, right? But it's also intended for your generation collectively, right? So what is it if you look at a lot of the climate change activists, I would say, this is my just guess, so I might be wrong, but I would say about 80% and 75% of them are millennials and younger, and the people who are really at the forefront of the movement are predominantly young people. And they're not people from Gen Xers or boomers. And those are the people who actually have the power. Those are the people who can actually make this big change, right? It's great if we can individually make those changes, but that doesn't even come close to what an industry does, right? The amount of pollution and carbon that they put out.
No,
so
listen, brother. Listen,
that level.
No, I get it. This is the only time I'm going to absolutely agree that we fucked this up. We've no matter what, Tayari, I'm glad you're doing it now, brother. And James, I'm glad we fucked this up. Now, I'm a scientist, so I'm a complete environmentalist, and I get it. Right? Let me just be clear. I don't eat pork or beef, right? I only eat chicken, turkey, and fish. Now, that has some piece of it, but I don't eat any pork or beef ever, and I have not done it for a while. But that's a part of it. But our carbon emission comes from more than just that. And I want to be absolutely clear on that. What we didn't do, we started the recycling piece of it, but if you look around, there's very few recycling plants, right? And I've looked them up in current cities, right, that are taking, one, we don't really know how to recycle, right? The different types of plastics, some are recycled. And let me talk to James about the straw. The reason why, and I went to a plant, the reason why they can't recycle the straw, it gets stuck in the machinery that segregates the plastics out. And they won't able to use the machine, so they want you to stop using the straws anymore. That's the major reason. and it ends up going through the system and it just passes right through. So part of what we didn't do, we started an idea of recycling, but we never funded and kept up with the programs and educated the general public on how to do so. Because although you may have your container, how many people are absolutely clear on how to do things, what your consumables are, what your non-consumable, what your perishable items are, how many people know that? The types of plastics. Like the
to a
types.
certain extent.
It's really clear,
If
right?
you live in San Francisco.
Because although you might separate it and I'm just taking it a level deeper where we didn't go, right? Because this is a big thing for me. You might dump all that shit in there and think that shit ends up back in the trash. It ends up in the trash, and not only in the trash, it ends up in our waste fields. In our waste fields, right? They end up creating what they call this release of methane gas. That it will sit for a while in these dumps because the trash isn't segregated appropriately. So we dug holes in the earth and dumped trash in there. And this what happens. And I was in St. Louis, I was in Kansas City, and you can smell the methane gas. You can tell where the sites are. So we failed you immensely in starting this project. As we grow, you ask, what can we do? As we grow technologically, we need to find ways to do something with our consumables, with the things that we're releasing into the environment itself. It's not only the carbon emission is happening multiple ways because we have the Amazon forest that produces almost 70% of our oxygen to the actual planet itself. But the idea around the emissions is that we still function on coal-based activities. What I love about your generation, this is why I'm giving you all the fucking credit, is because you go on renewable energy. You've championed the idea about renewable energy, and because our generation is still rural, we haven't learned newer careers to move from coal-based ideas and areas into a more renewable type energy. What has happened is that the legislation, the people that are currently in power, not to go back to politics, have then kept those laws in place. So although we have technologically advanced means of being able to change the climate itself, we've not instituted that way. We sat on our asses it's not been a number one priority for us. If you look, the guy, you remember his name was Tom Steyer? Remember who Tom Steyer was? Anybody who knows who Tom Steyer was?
He sounds familiar. What
Tom
is he doing?
Steyer, he was one of the...
He ran for president.
He's one of the...
Oh, yes.
His number one thing was about climate control, right? So how many people are aware of the Paris climate?
I am.
Paris?
Right. The Paris climate. You ever heard of the Paris climate? So you hear why the Paris climate was an agreement between all the nations to get together.
And Trump pulled out of it.
That's the one Trump pulled out of, yeah.
And he pulled out of the Paris climate, right? That's the information we need to discuss, right, in terms of that. But that's on the higher level, right? One, we need to re-enter the Paris climate point of it. But I want to get back to our individual neighborhoods. So in the Black neighborhoods, do you have like recycling containers that are like
Can I say something?
Ahead,
I don't even think they think that this issue is a Black issue. And I'm just going to go out there. When I came up, everybody, you talking about millennials and boomers, most of the people that were doing this were white. They were tree huggers. You don't see Black tree huggers. I'm just telling you. You know, and so I think that's part of it.
He said tree huggers.
It was people that we used to call granola. Affection.
I remember that.
You know, and they, you know, they were organic before organic caught on. Yeah. So before Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, you had Ralph's, Vons, and Alpha Beta, stuff like that. Nobody was caring if you had the perfect shaped tomato. That's what you wanted. You didn't want something that looked like it was taken straight from a vine. You know, it was the idea of beauty. Right?
Right.
And so we went down that path. But Black people, I told Van about one person we used to know. She had the water running. And growing up in Southern California, I was like, yo, why you got to run and run? She goes, that's not Black. You know, that's some white stuff. And I'm like,
so is environmental control a white thing? Is that a white thing?
I think in our generation, it was viewed as that. It was not, we had police brutality. We had incarceration. Right. There was one less thing that we had to champion.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
that's why I said we fucked that up. I take the hit on that. We didn't put programs in place. Like the things I was talking about are things that I feel we didn't carry on and do and pass on to you, right? To the millennials. I think what I feel your generation is so much more woke about trying to take care of the environment.
It's funny that we're the generation that's been accused of being unable to multitask, but at the same time, we're able to deal with protests and still environmentalists and be all of that in one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Van Ness, one of the things I don't see, like I was born in 1963. In the 70s, they used to run a bunch of commercials with this Indian, this native guy who had, they would show this guy, he was very peaceful. The Indians, they cultivated the land. And here come a bunch of people just throwing trash out of the window. And of course, this Native American, he would be right there and just kind of sharing a tear. The point I'm trying to make is that that was PSA announcements.
Yes.
When it came to protecting the environment, and you don't see that anymore.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You guys have no advertisement for that shit. We had, even about the laws, we had conjunction, junction, what's your function, hooking up trains, phrases, and clauses.
We have signs everywhere.
And
we have Greta Thunberg.
Right?
We have role models that we can look up to, right? But
you don't have that push in your advertisement in your other places to focus on those areas. And we didn't carry that on. It was replaced.
Actually, what's funny about that though? Like for your generation, right? That push was coming from the media, right? For our generation, it's actually almost like the reverse. It's actually coming from the people. The media hasn't caught up. The media actually is not doing it justice to the movement, right?
No, bro, you beat me up. I said we fucked that up.
No, I'm not beating you up. I'm just letting you know.
No, we fucked that one up. I don't care what nobody says. We fucked that up. We didn't continue, and we're continuing to fuck that up. And I praise your generation for being cognizant of that and not letting that piece go, right? So to Kisei's question to our group, I think what we didn't do was carry on the programs that we started, and we didn't provide a means to be able to consistently transfer that over, that you took care of that. We stuck to the shit that we knew continued to increase us technologically and advance us financially, and we took no consideration for the earth, and we've damaged it, and we fucked it up.
We accept your apology.
Yeah, no doubt. You've got this guy internationally, like you're talking about Amazon, Bolsonaro, the president over there in Brazil,
right?
Who's just going nuts, cutting down land like 3 or 4 football fields a minute, a second, who knows what it is. And that's the lungs of the whole globe.
It is.
If you are allowed to just say that, hey, you can do this in your house. It all goes down to like an injustice somewhere is an injustice anywhere. I know I messed up that phrase, but if you let people, and this might be crossing barriers too, but keep their ladies in burqas and whatever, and truth like that. It's a problem over here, so if you let that guy go rogue on his own country and do whatever he wants with the environment, we're going to feel the effects. And so that's why you need a Paris Climate Accord. That's why you need all of the nations. You can't be an isolationist. You can't be a xenophobe. You have to engage the globe. And that's
I want to say now, guys, that you asked that question. So I want to say, as a scientist, like we are already past that point.
Right.
Like, so my question will be, hey, Scribe, are we ready to go to the next question? Are you guys, anybody want to, have a last one?
Yeah, go ahead and ask your question.
Anybody want to have a last closing thought on that point? So I want to say this. So that is so important. I acknowledge we fucked that up, but now the earth is at crisis. Unfortunately and fortunately, when the coronavirus broke out, the 2 months or 3 months that we had an opportunity to have people stay in, it decreased the carbon level by 10% across the nation. I mean, it was great.
Yes.
It was great. I looked at the numbers, right? We weren't polluting the air, and it gives the plant and the planet a chance to recover. But we're getting back to business as usual, right? So yeah, let me ask my question. All right, here we go. So our planet is under siege from an expansion and growth as a human race. As we advance technologically, we damage our world environmentally. From catastrophic hurricanes in New Orleans to poison water and supplies in Flint, Michigan, African American neighborhoods are disproportionately affected. As inheritors of this planet, how do you, as millennial men of African descent, think you should respond to this crisis? And what activities can we, as a people of African descent, participate in to ensure our neighborhoods are protected? One more time. Our planet is under siege from our expansion and growth as a human race. As we advance technologically, we damage our world environmentally. From catastrophic hurricanes in New Orleans to poison waters supplies in Flint, Michigan, African American neighborhoods are disproportionately affected. We're located closer to sometimes the poor water supplies where people dump at, where sometimes the electrical grids are at. I mean, that's where the poor neighborhoods are at. And we know about, radioactivity and there's cancer and shit of that sort. So as inheritors of this planet, how do you as millennial men of African descent think you should respond to this crisis? And what activities can we collectively as the people of African descent participate in to assure our neighborhoods are protected?
Can I go for it?
Go for it.
Whoever.
All right. Actually, that even touches back on the other point that we were discussing on the question before, right? About how we actually have to look deeper than just what's going on at the surface. I feel that's what the statement that you made is correct. If you look at Flint, Michigan, and if you look at not just Black people, honestly, most of these places that have been really affected by different corporations and industry and all that stuff by fracking have been, minorities, right? Native American lands, lands that actually have, been deemed to be, sacred lands, right? And, even with that, they still moved them and they were fracking it, right? And I feel the real, all of that really shows you how everywhere in the world, right? All over the states, all over the world, it's always people who are of a lower class that actually are, dealing with the repercussions of the, all the poison that has been put out, right? And, in terms of the exploitation and who's really dealing with those consequences, of course, at one point we're all going to be facing that problem together, inevitably, right? But at this moment, and the first people who are always being affected by these conditions are poor working class people, or indigenous people. And to really bring a solution, we have to create allyship across the board, right? So that Tayari was saying earlier, when the Amazon is burning, we all need to be aware that it's not another country in the, somewhere in South America that is burning up. It is going to affect every single one of us, regardless of where we are placed in the world, right? And so we need to come together and to fight those fights together. But if it's, if you look at Flint, Michigan, or if you look at the other instances where the Native American lands were stolen, what you see is just people from that population and maybe some activists, but you don't see a mobilized sort of movement that is just backing that cause. And as long as it's just gonna become a neighborhood or a state problem or in a state movement, then it's not gonna really go to the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem is this is going on globally. It's been going on globally. Like the environment has been abused, and it continues to be abused. And unless we actually, all these people who are being affected by it, come, and collectively like voice, and their opinions, and make sure that this shit is not going on somewhere else in the world, then we can't stop it.
I second that. We have to come together as a collective, and one problem in one part of the world has to be everybody's problem, not just in the Black community with the general topic of this conversation, but with all issues.
So yeah, I mean, I guess, I agree a lot with what the guys just said, but I'm just thinking back, like growing up in South Africa, like for us, ever since I was a kid, like we still celebrate, it used to be a day, but now it's kind of become a week. But I don't know if you guys have heard of like Arbor Day. It's spelled like ARBOR. But basically,
plant a tree. You plant a tree that day, or plant trees that day.
Exactly. So every year on the 1st of September, like everyone around like the country, in every school, we used to plant trees, you know what I mean, wherever we could find land. And actually, that's part of the...
We used to do shit like that out here. We still do it no more. We failed you guys on that shit. You're right, bro.
So, like, those efforts and things like actually incorporating that into our education system, I think is, part of the solution and some of the things that we can do outside of everything that I think as millennials, like Mikhail was saying, like we're very much aware. And I think that's the one thing that I think we're very passionate about is sustaining the planet, because we realize that we're the ones that are going to be left. I know Tahadi was making a joke about it, but, we realize that like, it's important, for us to take care of this planet, because look at what happened with, Corona. If you don't take care of the planet, for some reason, we know that the planet will figure out a way to take care of you. So, you gotta.
Yeah,
that's fucking real talk, bro.
Real talk. You feel me? So,
that's fucking real talk.
That's kind of like our mission, and yes. So I think we should go back to our educational system and making sure that we incorporate these things into like the school system, and that so kids learn about it from a very young age,
Let me add another point, right? Which is like Tayari was making this point earlier, like, like in your generation back in those days, used to call conscious, like planet conscious people, like tree huggers and all those names, right? And I was kind of like finding it like ironic, honestly, right? When you're looking at like what honestly has really like, caused the situation that we're in terms of like, like the carbon emissions and the like, the global warming. Like there's actually like statistics that was kind of, I think that was done by the Atlantics, I believe. But it basically shows you like how within like this last century, within the 20th century, like the greenhouse gas effects just like skyrocketed, right? Like you can't even compare it to all the like the centuries that came before it, right? And what'd you say?
We've reached a tipping point.
Exactly, but like it keeps like drastically just like
the population keeps growing though, bro. That's why we keep growing.
But it's more than that. It's more than that though. It's not just the population growing. It's also how we're conducting business, and that's actually like the point that I'm making is right. Like, funny enough, right? Like even though like most people these days might be like the white people might be the ones who are conscious in terms of like the urgency of this global like like warming. But like historically, it's actually been indigenous people, Black people, like Native people who actually were really close to nature, who actually like understood that like exchange with nature, who understood the need to not exploit nature, right? But now we're at this point now where we've just been brainwashed and we've adapted to that mindset. you know, and that's
not
actually
brainwashed,
like,
brother. They've taken over, right? They've controlled the peace, right? So now,
but that's the thing, though. Like
we don't commune with nature no more, right? Now it's all about technology.
That's what I'm saying, though. Like, so,
right?
and that was done like by money, like through money means, right? Like through the media, through television, all that stuff. But at the same time, the point that I'm making is, even this point, right? You might not think that it actually is about white supremacy, but this question in and of itself is actually about white supremacy. We've adapted to a way of just like interacting with our natural environment in the way that white supremacy has dictated, right? This is not the way that we've been dealing with nature and with, you know, like with our exchange with nature. We always understood as native, like indigenous people, that you actually have to give, you know, for whatever that you take, right? And
are you guilty of that too?
I kind of agree with that.
Are we all guilty of that?
I understand
that's
what
I'm saying. We're all
because
guilty of that, but that's what I'm saying. We need to not just go back to our roots. Yeah. So this is what we need to do, right? We need to actually like really assess even our own mindsets, you know? Like you don't necessarily have to be like a Ku Klux Klan like member to have a white supremacist sort of like mindset. You know what I'm saying? Like that shit has penetrated through like everyone's like awareness and conscious in terms of like how we just like conducting business on a day-to-day basis, right? So we have to question ourselves if the way that we're engaging in this world is actually in a way that honors our ancestors and our planet.
Facts.
Or if it's just something that's exploitive.
Facts.
You know, he makes a lot of sense. I can understand what you're saying for as like in Louisiana, one of the things, because we grew up poor, and I have to keep reverting back to the South, everyone there practically has a garden. And with certain foods, people are self-sufficient when it comes to onions, tomatoes, collard greens, and peppers and small stuff like that. Now, what I'm getting at here is that when people come from an urban environment, they don't get to experience that. So they have a lack, there's a disconnect when people grow up in an urban environment and nature. For instance, I'm gonna ask a question, there's no right or wrong here, but just how many of you guys have ever gone camping? Okay, so we got two. So my point being is that
all three.
Okay, three. Okay. Well, there is not enough of that. And somebody mentioned about starting, you know, when people are young, to teach them about nature, to put them in how I got in touch with it. Now, I'm not sitting here claiming to be some kind of farm boy, but the point I'm trying to make is that once again, we didn't have a lot of money. And I was fortunate enough to grow up in youth camps where we would go and up to like Utah, Pingwich Lake, all these different places, and you know, backpack down the trail for 4 or 5 days. I had never experienced that until it happened. But I wouldn't have never got to experience it if it wasn't from the church or the organization that promoted it. But my point being is that, you know, coming from an urban environment, I can recall when I was young, I would just throw the fucking wrapper on the floor, on the ground, just open the candy bar and just shoot, throw it right on the ground. And
yeah.
But my point being is that I think when people get a taste of the outdoors, it creates more of a value, because it's a disconnect. If you've never been camping, how can you see the importance, or if you never really lived off the earth or experimented off the earth to some degree, then how can you understand the value of saving what you don't understand? Does that make sense?
It does. I think what's heavy too. Oh, I'm sorry, Terrell. Go ahead.
And also, I was going to say it goes deeper than that too, with your mind and your heart and with what you're being taught and conditioned. I mean, you can come out of New York City and value, you know, camping and being out in the wilderness because you were with. Or you can come from New York City, someone can take you on a camping trip, and it could be the worst experience of your life because you're taught.
That's true. That's true.
And this also goes down to
but why would it be the worst experience of your life?
Exactly.
Right?
That's because of your conditioning.
Why would it be the worst experience of your life? No matter what you experience in nature, that should be your fucking worst experience.
Exactly.
Maybe you had a great time, it wasn't a turn up, but it should teach you something about communing with the environment that you
exactly.
through.
Yeah, but I think his point is you could be so detached from it that you don't see the value, understand the value.
Exactly. But that's the problem.
Here's another point that this brother and Mikhail made, and whatever, and James is making, everybody's kind of making. And I appreciate James saying that he went camping or hiking through his church. But I do think, and it's a fundamental viewpoint, and I'm not stepping on anybody's toes with religion, but when you prioritize man as the top.
Thank you.
And everything else, you dominate everything else underneath.
Yes.
As opposed to you are a piece of the fabric in the whole thing of the universe. Then you approach it differently. And you do exactly what you're supposed to do. You dominate. So you overfish, you overhunt. I remember when the natives would see like Buffalo Bill, and they're like, yo, you've destroyed like
what you doing?
Carcasses.
What you doing?
Right. And it's just for like the pelts, and they throw away the organs and the meat and everything. And you're like, what is wrong? Or they decimate all these birds because the ladies wanted a feather in their cap. And you're like, yo. So like you said, that belief that you were just at the top of the heap and you do not have to conform. And then once you die, you go to a land of milk and honey and there's no repercussions. You know, that's not realistic. So
why the planet fucking rebels? That's why you get pandemics and outbreaks. The planet can't fuck the planet up like that. It's not gonna take that shit.
And
if you don't want to correct shit up, I believe this is because the planet is like, fuck that. You're not going to continue to damage me. There's one or two things going to happen here. Either you decide this, or I'm going to wipe you out. Listen, I'd rather make peace with the planet. This is sorry. My bad.